"You're fired!" Victoria Ashford delivered the words like a surgical strike, her voice cold and precise as winter steel. She stood behind her glass desk on the 42nd floor of Ashford Global Security Consulting, her perfectly tailored charcoal suit sharp enough to cut. Her dark hair pulled back so tight it seemed to mirror the control she demanded over everything in her world. Marcus Reed didn't flinch. He stood at attention in the center of her office, his security uniform pressed but worn at the edges, his broad shoulders squared, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. His dark eyes met hers with a steadiness that made something flutter uncomfortably in Victoria's chest before she crushed the feeling with practiced efficiency. "Did you hear me?" Victoria's manicured fingers drummed once against the cold glass surface. "I said you're terminated, effective immediately." "I heard you, ma'am." Marcus's voice was quiet, respectful, but underneath ran a current of something Victoria couldn't quite identify. Not defiance exactly, more like resignation mixed with dignity that refused to bend. "Then why," Victoria said, each word dropping like a gavel, "are you still standing in my office?" The morning sun, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, cast long shadows across the marble floors, highlighting the vast distance between Victoria's world of leather chairs and original artwork and the reality Marcus inhabited as head of her building's night security team. That distance had seemed perfectly natural to Victoria until approximately 3 hours ago, when Marcus had made the unforgivable mistake of questioning her direct order. "I wanted to explain," Marcus began. "There is nothing to explain." Victoria cut him off with the same tone she used to dismiss over-eager board members. "At 0200 hours this morning, I instructed you to allow Senator Crawford's chief of staff immediate access to our server room for a late-night data retrieval. You refused. You made me look incompetent in front of a key political ally. You disobeyed a direct order from the CEO of this company." "Ma'am, the security protocols—" "I write the protocols, Mr. Reed." Victoria's voice rose slightly, the only crack in her armor. "I sign your paycheck. I own this building and everything in it, including the authority to grant exceptions when necessary. Who do you think you are to override my decisions?" Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For a moment, Victoria saw something flicker behind his eyes, something that looked almost like pity, which infuriated her more than anger would have. "No one, ma'am. I'm no one." The words should have satisfied her. Instead, they landed wrong, hollow and bitter in the pristine air of her office. Victoria turned away, pretending to review something on her desktop screen, waiting for the sound of his footsteps retreating toward the door. They didn't come. "I asked you to leave, Mr. Reed." "I know, ma'am, but there's something you should understand before I go." Victoria spun back, ready to unleash the full force of her authority on this obstinate man who refused to know his place. But something in his expression stopped her, not pleading, not fear, something else entirely. "The man you wanted me to give access to," Marcus said carefully, "presented credentials that didn't match our system logs. His ID badge was a sophisticated forgery. The biometric scan showed he was trying to mask his real identity. Every security protocol we've implemented over the past 3 years was designed specifically to prevent exactly that kind of breach. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you." Victoria's breath caught, but she forced her expression to remain neutral. "Senator Crawford personally vouched for him." "I understand that, ma'am, but Senator Crawford doesn't have the security clearance to know what's actually stored in that server room. You do." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Victoria felt her carefully constructed world tilt slightly. She had ordered Marcus to grant access because Senator Crawford had called her personally at midnight, charming and persuasive, reminding her of the lucrative government contracts Ashford Global was competing for, suggesting that a small favor tonight could mean millions in revenue tomorrow. She hadn't questioned it, hadn't even considered that the late-night urgency might be suspicious. She had simply expected her orders to be followed without hesitation, the way everything in her life had been followed without hesitation since she took over her father's company at age 28. "So you decided," Victoria said slowly, dangerously, "that you knew better than I did." "No, ma'am. I decided that I knew my job." "Your job is to do what I tell you to do." "My job," Marcus said with quiet firmness, "is to protect this company's assets and personnel, even when that means protecting them from decisions made under incomplete information." Victoria felt her face flush with anger and something else she refused to name. This man, this night security guard who probably made less in a year than she spent on a single business trip, was standing in her office suggesting she had been manipulated, suggesting she had been careless. The worst part was the small voice in the back of her mind whispering that he might be right. "Get out," Victoria said, her voice dropping to something cold and final. "Security will escort you from the building. Your final check will be mailed. You're done here." Marcus nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed more dignity than her entire arsenal of corporate power moves. He turned toward the door with military precision, his posture perfect, his movements controlled. That was when Victoria saw it. As Marcus reached for the door handle, his uniform sleeve rode up slightly on his right forearm. In the bright morning sunlight, Victoria caught a glimpse of dark ink against his tanned skin. Not an amateur tattoo from a rebellious youth. This was something else, something that made her blood run cold. "Wait!" The word escaped before Victoria could stop it. Marcus paused, his hand on the polished chrome handle. "Your arm. Turn around." Marcus hesitated for the first time since entering her office. The hesitation itself was telling. He turned slowly, and Victoria saw the wariness in his eyes, the way he instinctively moved to pull his sleeve back down. "Show me your forearm." "Ma'am, I—" "Don't think—" "That wasn't a request, Mr. Reed." The irony of her demanding one more act of obedience from a man she'd just fired wasn't lost on Victoria, but curiosity had overtaken her anger. Something about that glimpse of ink had triggered a memory from 3 years ago, when she'd attended a Department of Defense briefing about protecting high-value corporate assets. Marcus slowly pushed up his right sleeve. The tattoo revealed itself in brutal clarity. A bone frog, the unmistakable symbol of the Navy SEALs, rendered in black and gray, surrounded by dates and numbers that Victoria's trained eye recognized as deployment markers. Beneath it, in precise lettering, "The only easy day was yesterday." Victoria's office suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. She stared at the ink, at the scarred tissue around it, suggesting injuries that came from more than desk work, at the way Marcus held himself with a stillness that she now recognized wasn't submission at all. It was discipline earned through hell. "You're—" Victoria's voice failed her for the first time in years. "Former Navy SEAL, ma'am. Team 3, 8 years active duty. Honorably discharged 4 years ago." The words rearranged everything Victoria thought she understood about the man standing before her. The quiet authority she'd mistaken for presumption. The way he'd assessed the security threat with precision she'd attributed to paranoia. The fact that he'd stood his ground against her fury without breaking. "Why are you working night security?" The question tumbled out before Victoria could calculate whether asking it showed weakness. Something painful flickered across Marcus's features. "Life doesn't always go according to plan, ma'am." Victoria's mind raced through implications. Navy SEALs underwent some of the most rigorous training in the world. They were entrusted with classified information and life-or-death decisions. They were trained to assess threats, follow protocols, and make split-second judgments that could save or cost lives. And she had just fired one for doing exactly that. "The man I sent to your checkpoint last night," Victoria heard herself say. "What happened after you denied him access?" "He left immediately, didn't argue, didn't try to convince me, just disappeared. That alone confirmed my assessment. Someone with legitimate business doesn't vanish when challenged." Victoria's stomach dropped. She reached for her phone, pulled up her security app, and reviewed the overnight logs with fresh eyes. The timestamps told a story she'd been too arrogant to see earlier. The fake chief of staff had attempted entry at 0200. By 0215, he was gone. By 0300, unusual network activity had been detected from an external source. Someone trying to breach their systems remotely when the physical infiltration failed. Marcus had stopped more than an unauthorized entry. He'd prevented a sophisticated corporate espionage operation, and she'd fired him for it. Victoria set her phone down carefully, her hands steadier than her thoughts. She had built Ashford Global from her father's modest security firm into a billion-dollar enterprise through intelligence, ruthlessness, and an unwavering belief in her own judgment. She hired the best analysts, paid top dollar for cutting-edge technology, and maintained a flawless reputation in an industry where reputation was everything. But she had also, she realized with uncomfortable clarity, surrounded herself with people who never questioned her, who nodded and smiled and executed orders without pushback. She had mistaken compliance for competence and obedience for loyalty. This man had been competent. He had been loyal, not to her ego, but to his actual job, and she had treated him like an obstacle to be removed. "Mr. Reed," Victoria's voice came out different than she intended. Less command, more uncertainty. "The protocols you referenced, did you write them?" "I updated them when I started here 3 years ago, ma'am. The previous system had significant vulnerabilities, multiple access points without proper verification, no real-time monitoring of server room entries, no secondary authentication for late-night requests from external parties." "I don't remember approving those changes." "You didn't, ma'am. Your previous head of security approved them, Harold Michaels." Victoria remembered Harold. 63 years old, former police captain, solid and unremarkable. He'd retired 2 years ago, and she'd barely noticed his departure, beyond signing off on his replacement. She certainly hadn't reviewed the security protocols he'd approved before leaving. "And since Harold left, who's been maintaining those protocols?" "I have, ma'am. Quarterly reviews, monthly updates based on emerging threats, weekly penetration testing to identify weaknesses." "Your night security, that's not in your job description." "No, ma'am." Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral, but it needed to be done. Victoria studied him with new eyes. The worn edges on his uniform weren't signs of carelessness. They were evidence of someone working longer hours than required. The weathering on his hands wasn't from menial labor. It was from years of training and combat, followed by years of maintaining standards that everyone else ignored. This man had been protecting her company with a level of expertise she hadn't known existed, and she'd never once acknowledged it. "Why didn't you apply for Harold's position when he retired?" For the first time, Marcus's composure cracked slightly. "I did, ma'am." Victoria felt another piece of her worldview crumble. "I don't remember seeing your application. Your HR director informed me that the position required a bachelor's degree in security management or related field. I didn't qualify." "But you're a Navy SEAL." "Yes, ma'am. I have extensive training in tactical operations, threat assessment, and security protocols. But I don't have a 4-year degree from an accredited university. I joined the service at 18. Victoria's throat tightened. She had never reviewed the qualifications for Harold's replacement herself. She'd delegated that to HR, trusting that they would identify the best candidate based on the official criteria that apparently valued a piece of paper over 8 years of elite special operations experience. The man they'd hired instead, Brad something, she couldn't even remember his last name, had lasted 6 months before being fired for incompetence. Who's been functioning as head of security since Brad left? There's been no official appointment, ma'am. The position has remained unfilled for 18 months. So who coordinates security operations? Who makes the critical decisions? Marcus said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Victoria walked slowly to the window, her heels clicking against marble in a rhythm that suddenly sounded hollow. Below, the city stretched out in a grid of steel and glass, buildings competing for dominance, everyone climbing over everyone else to reach heights that, from up here, all looked disappointingly similar. She had spent her entire adult life climbing, proving herself in a male-dominated industry, building something her late father would be proud of, making herself untouchable through wealth, power, and control. But standing here now, having just fired possibly the most competent person in her organization for the crime of competence, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years: doubt. "Mr. Reed," she said without turning around, "the discharge from the Navy, you said it was honorable." "Yes, ma'am, but you left after 8 years. SEALs usually do more." The silence stretched so long, Victoria finally turned to look at him. Marcus's face had gone carefully blank, but his eyes told a different story. Pain. Loss. The kind of wounds that don't show up on flesh. "I needed to come home, ma'am. My younger sister, she was raising her son alone. The father was never in the picture. She got sick. Cancer, stage 4. I got emergency leave, then extended it, then realized I needed to choose. She died 7 months after my discharge." Victoria's chest constricted. "And the boy?" "I have custody. Dylan's 9 now. Smart kid, good kid, deserves better than what I can give him, but I'm doing my best." The final piece fell into place. Night security paid less than specialized positions, but it offered something Victoria had never considered valuable: schedule flexibility. Marcus worked nights so he could be home when his nephew got off school. He took the job no one else wanted because it was the only way to balance single parenthood with the need to pay rent and keep food on the table, and she had just fired him. "I'm sorry about your sister," Victoria said, the words inadequate. "Thank you, ma'am." They stood in her immaculate office, the morning sun now fully risen, the city below humming with people starting their days, pursuing their ambitions, convinced of their own importance. Victoria Ashford had started this morning absolutely certain of 3 things. Her authority was absolute, her judgment was superior, and people who disobeyed her deserved consequences. Now, barely an hour later, she was certain of nothing except that she'd made a terrible mistake. The question was, what did she do about it? "Mr. Reed," Victoria returned to her desk, her mind already calculating possibilities, weighing options, doing what she did best, finding solutions to complex problems. "Your termination. I may have been premature." "Ma'am, with respect, you made your position clear." "My position," Victoria said carefully, "was based on incomplete information. You were correct in your assessment of last night's security threat. Your actions prevented what appears to have been a sophisticated breach attempt. That deserves recognition, not termination." Marcus's expression didn't change, but Victoria saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself ready for disappointment. This was a man who'd learned not to trust promises from people in power. I'm going to recommend you for head of security, Victoria continued. Full salary, benefits, and a formal review of all department protocols to ensure we're actually implementing the standards you've been maintaining unofficially. Ma'am, I appreciate the gesture, but your HR requirements will be revised, Victoria interrupted. Today, experience will be weighted equally with formal education. Your military service qualifies. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Marcus's features. Why? Why what? Why change your mind? An hour ago, I was incompetent trash to be removed. Now I'm qualified for a senior position? What changed? Victoria could have lied, could have framed it as a purely business decision based on threat assessment and resource optimization. But something about the way Marcus stood there, dignified in his worn uniform, refusing to grovel or celebrate, made her choose honesty instead. I saw your tattoo, she admitted, and I realized I've been seeing you as a service position rather than a person with a history. That was my failure, not yours. So the tattoo made the difference? The proof that I was military? No. Victoria surprised herself with the answer. The tattoo made me pause long enough to actually think about who you are rather than what position you hold in my organizational chart. That's when I realized I've been running this company like a dictator rather than a leader. People who question me aren't insubordinate. They're doing their jobs properly. I just forgot the difference. Marcus studied her with those steady, dark eyes that had probably assessed countless threats in deserts and jungles, and now assessed her with the same careful precision. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted. You're scared. Victoria's spine stiffened. Defensively. Excuse me? You just discovered your judgment isn't infallible. Your control isn't absolute. Someone you dismissed as insignificant turned out to be critically important. That's terrifying for someone who's built their entire life on being right. The observation cut clean through Victoria's defenses. She wanted to be offended, to reassert her authority, to remind this man that she still signed his checks and controlled his future. But he was right. She was terrified. So what do I do about that? Victoria asked, the question emerging vulnerable and raw. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. You already started, ma'am. You admitted a mistake. Most people in your position never make it that far. And the next step? You learn to trust the people you hire to do their jobs, even when their judgment conflicts with yours. Especially then. Victoria nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom in words delivered by a man who probably made in a year what she spent on a single designer handbag. The head of security position, she said. Are you interested? Marcus hesitated. Can I ask you something first? Yes. If I hadn't had that tattoo, if I was just a night security guard with no military background, no proof that I knew what I was talking about, would you have reconsidered? The question hung between them like a test. Victoria wasn't sure she could pass honestly. I don't know, she finally admitted. I'd like to think I would have reviewed the security logs regardless and realized you were right, but I can't say for certain. The tattoo did matter. Maybe it shouldn't have, but it did. Marcus nodded, something like respect flickering in his expression. That's an honest answer. Is it enough? I guess we'll find out, ma'am. Marcus Reed accepted the position of head of security 3 days later, after Victoria personally rewrote the job requirements and increased the salary to something that made his hands shake when he saw the offer letter. The paperwork was processed quietly, without fanfare, but news traveled through Ashford Global like electricity through copper wire. The night security guard was now a department head. Victoria's executive team reacted exactly as she expected. Her CFO, Richard Hartley, cornered her after the Monday morning leadership meeting, his expression hovering between confusion and concern. Victoria, I need to understand the logic here, Richard said, closing her office door with more force than necessary. You promoted the man you fired last week. The optics alone. The optics, Victoria interrupted, not looking up from her computer screen, show that I correct mistakes when I make them. That's called leadership, Richard, not weakness. But his qualifications are exceptional. 8 years as a Navy SEAL, including multiple classified operations I'm not cleared to know about, extensive training in threat assessment, crisis management, and security protocols that exceed anything our previous department heads implemented. He's been functionally running security for 18 months, without the title or compensation. I'm rectifying an oversight. Richard's jaw tightened. You're sure this isn't about something else? Victoria finally looked up, her expression diamond hard. Such as, there are rumors about the incident last week. Senator Crawford has been making calls. Senator Crawford, Victoria said with dangerous quiet, tried to compromise our systems using a sophisticated social engineering attack. Marcus Reed identified and prevented that breach. If the senator has concerns, he's welcome to explain them to the FBI, who are now investigating the incident. That last part was new information to Richard, and Victoria watched him process the implications. If she'd allowed the breach, if Marcus hadn't stopped it, Ashford Global could have lost every government contract they held. The company's reputation would have been destroyed overnight. I see, Richard said carefully. Then the promotion makes sense from a liability standpoint. It makes sense from every standpoint, Victoria corrected. Marcus Reed is the most qualified security professional we've ever employed. My only mistake was not recognizing that sooner. After Richard left, Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at the empty space where Marcus had stood a week ago when she'd tried to destroy his livelihood. The memory tasted like copper in her mouth, sharp and unpleasant. She had spent the weekend doing something she rarely allowed herself. Genuine self-reflection. The uncomfortable kind that forced her to examine not just what she'd done, but why. Victoria Ashford had inherited her father's company at 28 after his sudden heart attack. She'd been working there for 6 years by then, learning every aspect of the business, but inheriting wasn't the same as earning. The board had doubted her. Competitors had smelled blood in the water. Clients had quietly explored other options. So Victoria had become ruthless, decisive, unquestionable. She'd fired anyone who hesitated to follow her vision, promoted those who executed without pushback, and built a reputation as someone who tolerated no challenges to her authority. It worked brilliantly. Ashford Global had tripled in value under her leadership. She'd earned respect through results, crushing doubt with quarterly earnings and contract acquisitions that made industry headlines. But somewhere in that climb, she'd stopped listening. She'd surrounded herself with people who said yes and mistaken their compliance for validation of her judgment. Marcus Reed had said no, and he'd been right. That reality kept Victoria awake at night, staring at her penthouse ceiling, wondering how many other Marcus Reeds she'd dismissed or destroyed without even realizing it. The following Tuesday, Victoria did something unprecedented. She attended the morning security briefing. The conference room fell silent when she entered. Marcus stood at the head of the table, mid-sentence about updated badge protocols, his expression carefully neutral. 6 security team members sat frozen, clearly wondering if they were about to witness another termination. Continue, please, Victoria said, taking a seat at the back of the room. Pretend I'm not here. That was impossible, of course. Her presence changed the oxygen levels, made everyone hyper-aware of their posture and word choice. But Marcus recovered smoothly, returning to his presentation with the same measured competence he brought to everything. Victoria watched him work, The way he explained complex protocols in clear language, how he invited questions and actually listened to concerns rather than dismissing them. The respect in his team's eyes as they recognized someone who understood their work from the inside, not from a management handbook. This was leadership, not the kind Victoria had been practicing, demanding obedience through fear and hierarchy, but something more fundamental, authority earned through knowledge and character, rather than title. After the meeting ended and the team filed out, Marcus gathered his materials with practiced efficiency. Victoria remained seated, studying the man she'd so catastrophically misjudged. "You didn't need to attend," Marcus said without looking at her. "I send you the briefing summaries." "Which I should have been reading more carefully," Victoria admitted. "Your threat assessments are remarkably thorough." "It's my job." "It's more than that." Victoria stood, approaching the conference table. "You care about protecting this company in a way that goes beyond a paycheck." Marcus finally met her eyes. "I care about protecting people, ma'am. The company is just the structure they work inside." The distinction hit Victoria hard. She'd been so focused on quarterly earnings and market position that she'd forgotten Ashford Global employed 347 people whose lives depended on the company's success and security. "Your nephew," Victoria heard herself say. "Dylan, how is he adjusting to your schedule change?" Surprise flickered across Marcus's face. "He's good. The better salary means I could hire a proper after-school sitter instead of leaving him with neighbors. Makes a difference. I'd like to meet him." The words emerged before Victoria fully thought them through, but once spoken, she realized she meant them. This man had a life beyond her organization chart, a child depending on him, a story that made his quiet competence even more remarkable. "Ma'am, that's not necessary." "I'm not asking as your employer," Victoria said carefully. "I'm asking as someone who would like to understand the person behind the uniform better. But if you're uncomfortable with that, I respect your boundary." Marcus studied her with those assessing eyes that had probably saved lives in combat zones. "Why?" "Honestly, because I owe you more than a promotion and a salary increase. I owe you acknowledgement that you're a complete human being, not just a function I can use and discard. Meeting Dylan feels like a step toward that." "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. You corrected your mistake. That's more than most people in your position would do." "That's a depressingly low bar." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. "Welcome to how most of the world lives." The observation carried no bitterness, just simple truth. Victoria felt the distance between their experiences like a chasm she'd never bothered to notice before. "Friday evening," Marcus said after a long pause. "Dylan has a school event, science fair. If you actually want to see my world, that's what it looks like. 6:30 at Roosevelt Elementary." "I'll be there," Victoria promised. "If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one." Friday evening arrived with autumn rain turning the city streets silver and black. Victoria sat in her car outside Roosevelt Elementary, watching families stream through the doors with children clutching poster boards and nervous smiles. She'd changed out of her work suit into dark jeans and a simple sweater, feeling oddly exposed without her armor of designer labels. The last time she'd attended anything at an elementary school, she'd been a student herself, and even then, her father had rarely made it to events because business always came first. Victoria had promised herself she'd be different when she had children someday. That promise remained unfulfilled at 34, her romantic life a graveyard of relationships that couldn't survive her work schedule and emotional unavailability. Inside, the gymnasium smelled like old basketballs and cafeteria food. Student projects lined tables in crooked rows. Parents clustered around their children with phones ready to capture proud moments. The noise level was overwhelming. Laughter, excited explanations, squeaking shoes on polished floors. Victoria spotted Marcus immediately. He stood beside a table near the back, wearing civilian clothes that somehow made him look even more dangerous than his uniform. Dark jeans, a gray Henley that showed the strength in his frame, that bone frog tattoo visible on his forearm. Beside him stood a small boy with Marcus's dark eyes and a smile that could power solar panels. Dylan wore a button-up shirt that was slightly too big, probably bought to last through the school year, and his hands moved with animated energy as he explained his project to an elderly couple. Victoria approached slowly, suddenly uncertain in a way that boardrooms never made her feel. "Ms. Ashford," Marcus noticed her first, surprise evident despite his control. "You came." "I said I would." Victoria smiled at Dylan, who was now staring at her with open curiosity. "You must be Dylan. I've heard good things about you." "You know Uncle Marcus?" Dylan asked, his voice carrying that pitch unique to 9-year-olds still finding their register. "I work with him. He's my head of security." Dylan's chest puffed up visibly. "Uncle Marcus is the best. He knows everything about protecting people. He was a Navy SEAL. Do you know what that is?" "I do," Victoria said, kneeling to be at eye level with the boy. "It means he's one of the toughest, smartest people in the world. You're lucky to have him." "I know." Dylan's expression turned serious. "He took care of me when my mom got sick. He left the Navy and everything. Mom said he was a hero, and not just because of the military." Victoria felt her throat constrict. She glanced up at Marcus, who was looking anywhere but at her, his jaw tight with emotion he clearly didn't want to display. "Your mom was right," Victoria said softly. "What's your science project about?" Dylan's face transformed back to pure excitement. "Water filtration. See, lots of people don't have clean water, and I wanted to show how you can make a filter using stuff from nature. Uncle Marcus helped me test different materials." The project was impressive. Detailed charts showing contamination levels, side-by-side comparisons of filtered versus unfiltered samples, photographs documenting the process. This wasn't a last-minute effort thrown together to meet a deadline. This was careful work done by a child who'd been taught that details mattered. "This is remarkable, Dylan," Victoria said, genuinely impressed. "Have you thought about what you want to be when you grow up? An engineer, or maybe a Navy SEAL like Uncle Marcus, or both?" Dylan grinned. "Uncle Marcus says I can be anything if I work hard enough and stay curious." "Your uncle is right." They spent the next hour moving through the science fair. Victoria watched Marcus interact with Dylan's teachers, with other parents, with children who clearly knew him from previous school events. He was different here, more relaxed, quicker to smile, the hardness in his eyes softened by genuine affection for these kids trying their best with poster board and markers. Several parents recognized Victoria despite her casual clothes. She saw the double takes, the whispered conversations, the questions in their eyes about why the CEO of Ashford Global was attending an elementary school science fair. Let them wonder. "Dylan's teacher says he's doing really well," Marcus mentioned as they stood by the refreshment table while Dylan showed his project to the judges. "Math and science are his strong suits. Reading is harder, but he's working on it." "You're doing an incredible job with him," Victoria said. Marcus's expression flickered with something painful. "I'm trying. Some days I feel like I'm drowning, like I'm not enough. He deserves 2 parents, stability, a future that isn't dependent on me not screwing up." The vulnerability in those words created an opening Victoria recognized instinctively. This was what connection looked like. 2 people lowering their defenses enough to be honest about their fears. I grew up with two parents and plenty of money, Victoria said quietly, and I still felt like something was missing. My father was brilliant but emotionally absent. My mother left when I was 12 because she couldn't compete with his company for attention. I inherited his business and his inability to let people close. So when I look at Dylan, I see a kid who has something I never had. Someone who shows up consistently, who sacrifices for him, who loves him without conditions. Marcus turned to face her fully. You really believe that? I've spent the last week reviewing my life and realizing how empty it is despite all my success. I live in a penthouse with a view of the entire city, and I can't remember the last time I had a genuine conversation with someone who wasn't trying to sell me something or get something from me. You're raising a child while working full-time and still finding energy to care about doing your job right. That's not drowning, Marcus. That's heroic. I'm not a hero, Marcus said roughly. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's exactly what makes you one. The air between them shifted, became charged with something Victoria couldn't name but felt acutely. Marcus was looking at her differently now, not as his employer or the woman who'd almost destroyed his life, but as a person who might understand the weight he carried. Dylan's been asking questions lately, Marcus said after a long pause, about his mom, about why his dad never wanted to know him, about whether he's the reason his family fell apart. I don't know how to answer those questions without lying or breaking his heart. What do you tell him? The truth, as much as he can handle, that his mom loved him completely, that his dad's absence is about his dad's failings, not Dylan's worth. That family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stay. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. That's a good answer. Is it? Because most days I feel like I'm one mistake away from failing him completely. Welcome to caring about someone, Victoria said with a sad smile. The fear of failing them never goes away. You just learn to work through it. Is that why you don't have kids? The fear? The question was too perceptive, too direct. Victoria should have deflected or changed the subject. Instead, she answered honestly. Partially. Mostly it's because I've never trusted anyone enough to build that kind of life with them. Everyone who gets close wants something, my money, my connections, my name. I learned early to protect myself by keeping distance. That sounds lonely. It is. Victoria watched Dylan across the room, his face glowing with pride as a judge examined his project. Watching you with Dylan makes me wonder what I've missed by playing it safe. It's not too late, Marcus said. You're 34, not 94. How did you know my age? Your birthday is in the employee directory. I pay attention to details. Victoria laughed, surprising herself. Of course you do. Navy SEAL turned security professional. Details are probably encoded in your DNA. Something like that? Marcus's lips curved slightly. You're different outside the office. So are you. Yeah, well, suits and uniforms hide a lot. Maybe that's the problem, Victoria mused. We spend so much time in costumes playing roles that we forget who we actually are underneath. Dylan bounded over before Marcus could respond, his face flushed with excitement. Uncle Marcus, Ms. Chen said my project is one of the best in the grade. She thinks I could enter the regional competition. Marcus's pride transformed his entire face. That's amazing, buddy. All that hard work paid off. We should celebrate. Dylan looked between Marcus and Victoria with hopeful eyes. Can we get ice cream, please? Marcus hesitated, clearly uncertain about extending the evening or about Victoria's willingness to continue. She made the decision easy. Ice cream sounds perfect, Victoria said. My treat. You don't have to, Marcus began. I want to. Victoria met his eyes steadily. Unless you'd prefer I didn't intrude on your celebration. You're not intruding, Dylan announced before Marcus could answer. Uncle Marcus talks about you sometimes. He says you're really smart, but that you work too much and probably don't have enough fun. Dylan, Marcus warned, his expression caught between mortification and amusement. Victoria laughed genuinely for the first time in weeks. Your uncle is absolutely right. I definitely don't have enough fun, so ice cream would be an improvement to my evening. They ended up at a small ice cream shop 3 blocks from the school, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and flavors written in chalk on a blackboard. Dylan ordered chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Marcus got vanilla. Victoria surprised herself by ordering mint chip with hot fudge. I haven't had ice cream in probably 5 years, she admitted as they sat at a wobbly table by the window. Why not? Dylan asked with the straightforward confusion of someone who couldn't imagine voluntarily avoiding ice cream. I got busy with work and forgot to do things just because they're enjoyable. That's sad, Dylan said matter-of-factly. Uncle Marcus says life is short and you should eat dessert sometimes and play games and laugh, even when things are hard. He says that's what Mom would want us to do. Marcus's eyes glistened, but he smiled. Your mom had a sweet tooth that could power a candy factory. She'd be proud of your science project and disappointed in my vanilla choice. Mom liked adventures, Dylan told Victoria seriously. Uncle Marcus says I'm like her that way, always curious, always asking questions. Curiosity is a gift, Victoria said. Never lose that, Dylan. They talked easily while ice cream disappeared and the shop's lights glowed warm against the darkening street outside. Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't experienced in years. No agenda to push, no appearance to maintain, just conversation flowing naturally from science projects to favorite books, to Marcus's carefully edited stories about places he'd been deployed. Did you ever get scared? Dylan asked his uncle. When you were a SEAL? Marcus considered the question seriously. Yeah, buddy, pretty often. Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do what's right even when you're scared. Is that why you stopped that bad guy at Ms. Ashford's building, even though she got mad at you? Victoria's ice cream turned to concrete in her stomach. She hadn't realized Dylan knew about the incident. Marcus shot her an apologetic look. Dylan overheard me talking on the phone with a friend, and yes, that's exactly why. I knew Ms. Ashford might fire me, but protecting the company was more important than protecting my job. But she didn't fire you, Dylan said, looking at Victoria with a child's directness. She made you a boss instead. That means she's smart and knows when she makes mistakes. You're right, Victoria said softly. I did make a mistake. Your uncle saved the company, and I almost punished him for it. I'm grateful he gave me a chance to make it right. Uncle Marcus says everybody makes mistakes. What matters is fixing them. Your uncle is very wise. I know. Dylan yawned suddenly, the excitement of the evening catching up with him. He's the best person I know. Marcus ruffled Dylan's hair affectionately. And you're the best kid I know. We should probably head home. School tomorrow. Outside, rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflecting streetlights in pools of color. Victoria's driver had been waiting patiently for 2 hours, but she'd forgotten he was even there. Thank you for coming tonight, Marcus said as they stood on the sidewalk. It meant a lot to Dylan, and to me. Thank you for inviting me into your world, Victoria replied. I learned more tonight about what's actually important than I have in years of board meetings. Dylan hugged Victoria suddenly, his small arms wrapping around her waist, with unself-conscious affection. You're nice. You should come to my baseball games sometime. Uncle Marcus comes to all of them, but it's more fun when there's more people. Victoria's eyes burned. She couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged her with such genuine warmth, expecting nothing in return. "I'd like that very much," she managed. After they left, Victoria sat in her car, watching Marcus and Dylan walk down the street hand in hand, Dylan chattering excitedly about something while Marcus listened with patient attention. They lived in a different world than Victoria, smaller apartments, tighter budgets, harder choices, but they had something she'd never possessed, despite all her wealth. They had each other. Really had each other, with presence and commitment and love that didn't come with conditions. Victoria gave her driver instructions to take her home, then pulled out her phone and began researching something she'd never considered before: what her company could do to better support single parents on staff. Flexible scheduling, better parental leave policies, childcare assistance programs. If she was going to change, it needed to be more than just one corrected mistake with one employee. It needed to be systematic, intentional, real. Marcus Reed had opened a door Victoria hadn't known existed. Now she needed to decide whether she had the courage to walk through it. The crisis arrived on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later, dressed in expensive cologne and entitled Arrogance. Victoria was reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant buzzed through. "Ms. Ashford, there's a Mr. Trevor Hastings here to see you. He says it's urgent and concerns Dylan Reed." Victoria's stomach dropped. She knew that name. Marcus had mentioned Trevor exactly once during a conversation at Dylan's baseball game the previous weekend. Trevor Hastings was Dylan's biological father, the man who'd walked away before Dylan was born and never looked back. "Send him in." Trevor Hastings entered her office like he owned it. Mid-30s, expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, and the kind of smile that probably worked on people who didn't spend their lives spotting predators. Victoria had dealt with enough corporate raiders to recognize the breed instantly. "Ms. Ashford, thank you for seeing me." Trevor extended his hand with practiced charm. Victoria didn't take it. "What do you want, Mr. Hastings?" Trevor's smile faltered briefly before recovering. "Direct. I appreciate that. I'm here about my son." "Dylan is not your son. You forfeited that relationship 9 years ago." Actually, Trevor pulled papers from his briefcase with theatrical precision. "Legally, I'm still his biological father with parental rights. My attorney has prepared a petition for shared custody. I wanted to give you advance notice as a courtesy since I understand you've become friendly with Marcus and the boy." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Advance notice? Why are you telling me this at all?" "Because I've done my research on you, Ms. Ashford. You're a powerful woman with resources. Marcus Reed is your employee, living paycheck to paycheck despite his recent promotion. If this goes to court, he'll be financially destroyed by legal fees alone, unless someone helps him, someone like you." The threat was clear. Trevor wasn't here out of courtesy. He was testing whether Victoria cared enough to become financially entangled in Marcus's personal life. And if she did, Trevor would use that connection to paint Marcus as unstable, dependent, unfit. "What do you really want?" Victoria asked coldly. Trevor dropped the pretense. "I'm getting married. My fiancée comes from old money, the kind that cares about family legacy and lineage. Having a child already, especially one I've never acknowledged, is problematic. But abandoning him entirely is worse for appearances. Shared custody solves the problem. I get to be the redemption story, the father who came back, while Marcus does the actual work of raising him. That's despicable. That's practical." Trevor leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm filing for custody. The court will see a biological father with substantial financial resources versus a single uncle working security with a modest income. I'll win, at minimum, partial custody, unless... Unless what? Unless Marcus agrees to my terms privately. I get Dylan for appearances, holidays, school events, photo opportunities. Marcus keeps him the rest of the time and stays out of my way when I need him. No child support from me, but also no interference with my access. Victoria felt rage burning through her chest. You want to treat that child like a rental property, show him off when convenient, ignore him the rest of the time, and traumatize him in the process. I want what's legally mine while being realistic about my lifestyle limitations. Dylan will be fine. Kids are resilient. Get out of my office. I haven't finished. Get out, Victoria repeated, her voice dropping to something dangerous. Or I will have security remove you. And Mr. Hastings, if you think I'm going to let you use that child as a prop for your social climbing, you've severely miscalculated. Trevor stood slowly, his expression hardening. You care about them. That's your weakness, Ms. Ashford. Marcus can't afford to fight me, and you can't afford to be seen bankrolling your employees' personal legal battles without raising questions about the nature of your relationship. Either way, I win. You have 48 hours before I file. After he left, Victoria sat in her office with shaking hands. She called Marcus immediately. We need to talk, now. 30 minutes later, Marcus sat across from her desk, his face pale as she explained Trevor's visit. She watched the color drain further as reality set in. He's right, Marcus said quietly. I can't afford a custody battle. I've been saving for Dylan's college fund, but legal fees would wipe that out in weeks. And Trevor's right about the optics. Biological father with financial stability versus me. Marcus, you raised him. You're his father in every way that matters. I know that. Dylan knows that. But courts don't always see it that way, especially when the biological parent shows up with resources and a sob story about wanting to be involved. Victoria stood and paced to her windows, looking out over the city that suddenly felt hostile and sharp. What if we fight anyway? I can help with legal costs. No. Marcus's voice was firm. That's exactly what Trevor wants. He wants to tie you to this. Make it look like you're personally invested in my life, beyond professional boundaries. Your board is already questioning the promotion. This would give them ammunition to suggest impropriety. I don't care what the board thinks. Yes, you do, and you should. You worked too hard to build this company to risk it over my problems. Victoria turned to face him. Dylan is not a problem. He's a child who deserves protection. I know, and I'll protect him, but not by destroying your reputation in the process. The hopelessness in Marcus's voice broke something in Victoria. This man had saved her company, changed her perspective on leadership, and shown her what genuine integrity looked like. Now he was drowning, and he was too proud to accept the help she desperately wanted to give. There has to be a way, Victoria said. There isn't. Not one that doesn't cost you everything you've built. They sat in heavy silence, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the office. Victoria's mind raced through possibilities, each one leading to the same conclusion. Helping Marcus would invite scrutiny she couldn't afford, but not helping him would mean abandoning someone who'd proven himself worthy of loyalty when it mattered most. I need to talk to Dylan, Marcus said finally. He deserves to know what's coming. Let me come with you. Marcus looked at her with something like pain. Victoria, the more involved you are, the worse this looks. Trevor's already monitoring your connection to us. If we give him evidence of personal relationship beyond employee-employer, I'm not afraid of Trevor Hastings. Maybe you should be. Men like him fight dirty. So do women like me when protecting people they care about. The words hung in the air, revealing more than Victoria had intended. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, and she saw him processing the implications. You care about us, he said slowly. Yes. No point denying it now. I care about Dylan, and I care about you, not because you work for me, but because you're one of the most decent people I've ever met. So I'm not walking away from this fight, even if it costs you your company. The company isn't worth having if I become the kind of person who lets children get used as pawns while I hide behind professional distance. Marcus stood and walked to where Victoria stood by the windows. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way that combat and single parenthood hadn't managed to break. I can't ask you to risk everything for us, he said quietly. You're not asking, I'm choosing. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, the walls he'd maintained finally crumbling enough to show the exhaustion and fear beneath. I'm scared, Victoria, really scared. Not for me, but for Dylan. That kid has already lost his mother. If Trevor takes him, even partially, it'll destroy something in him. Then we don't let Trevor take him. How? You heard the reality. Courts favor biological parents with resources. Victoria's mind had been working through angles even as they talked. Years of corporate strategy and negotiation tactics suddenly found new purpose. Trevor doesn't actually want custody, she said slowly. He wants the appearance of it, which means he has a weakness. His priorities aren't Dylan, they're his image. We can use that. I'm not following. Trevor's getting married into old money. Families like that value reputation above everything else. What would happen if his fiancée's family discovered he abandoned his child for 9 years and only returned when it became socially convenient? They'd probably question his character. Exactly. And what if they discovered he's using custody threats as leverage to negotiate access on his terms? That's not redemption, that's manipulation. Marcus's eyes sharpened. You want to expose him. I want to make it clear that fighting for Dylan will cost Trevor more than walking away. That's the language men like him understand. Cost-benefit analysis. That could backfire, make him dig in harder. It could, Victoria admitted, but right now he thinks he has all the power because he has money and biology on his side. We need to show him that power has limits when it collides with truth. They spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Victoria made calls to her personal attorney, one of the best family law specialists in the state. Marcus provided documentation of every school event, medical appointment, and milestone he'd managed for Dylan over the past 4 years. The paper trail of his commitment was extensive and undeniable. By evening, they had a plan. Not a guarantee, but a fighting chance. Victoria also made another call, one Marcus didn't know about. She contacted a private investigator she'd used for corporate due diligence and gave him 48 hours to compile everything on Trevor Hastings. Financial records, employment history, relationships, anything that might reveal character flaws, a family court judge would find relevant. That night, Victoria barely slept. She kept thinking about Dylan's face at the science fair, his unself-conscious hug, his simple faith that adults would protect him. The child had already suffered the loss of his mother. The thought of him being used as a bargaining chip in Trevor's social climbing made Victoria's rage burn hotter than any business betrayal ever had. The next morning brought unexpected support. Richard Hartley, her CFO, who'd questioned Marcus's promotion, appeared in her office before 9. I heard about the custody situation, Richard said without preamble. Victoria's defenses rose instantly. And I want to help. My sister went through something similar. Ex-husband appeared after years of absence, trying to manipulate custody for financial leverage. It was hell. If you're fighting this, you need someone watching the company's interests, while you're focused elsewhere. I can do that. Richard, Victoria's voice caught unexpectedly. You've been different lately, Richard continued. More present, more human. Whatever Marcus Reed and his nephew did to crack through that armor you wear, I'm grateful for it. You're a better leader now than you've ever been, so let me support you. That's what actual leadership teams do. Thank you, Victoria managed. That means more than you know. The private investigator delivered his report that afternoon. Trevor Hastings had a history of failed business ventures funded by romantic partners, multiple complaints from former employers about ethical violations, and, critically, a previous relationship where he'd signed away parental rights to another child in exchange for not paying child support. The pattern was clear. Trevor used people, including his own children, as resources to be leveraged for personal gain. Victoria's attorney confirmed what she suspected. This history would be highly relevant in family court, especially when combined with Marcus's documented evidence of consistent, competent parenting. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Trevor called Victoria's office the next morning, his voice tight with anger. "You've been investigating me." "I've been establishing facts," Victoria corrected. "There's a difference." "You're making a mistake. This is between me and Marcus." "Wrong. This is about Dylan, a 9-year-old child you've ignored for his entire life. And yes, I've been thorough in understanding exactly who you are before you're allowed anywhere near him. I'm his father." Biology doesn't make you a father, Trevor. Showing up does. Sacrificing does. Loving without conditions does. Marcus has been Dylan's father in every meaningful way. You're just a name on a birth certificate who suddenly cares now that it's socially convenient. You can't stop me from filing for custody. You're right, I can't. But I can make sure that when you do, the judge sees the complete picture. Your history of abandoning children, your pattern of using relationships for financial gain, your current motivation being appearance management for your upcoming marriage, rather than genuine concern for Dylan's well-being. Silence stretched across the line. Victoria pressed her advantage. "Here's what's going to happen, Trevor. You're going to walk away. Permanently. Marcus will agree not to pursue child support. You should have been paying all along. You'll sign away your parental rights cleanly. And in exchange, your fiancé's family never learns the truth about your character." That's blackmail. That's protection. For Dylan, from you. Take the offer, Trevor. It's more generous than you deserve. Another long pause. Then, "I need to think about it. You have until 5 o'clock today. After that, we proceed to court, and everything becomes public record." Trevor hung up without answering. Victoria sat at her desk, adrenaline making her hands shake. She'd just threatened a custody fight she wasn't certain they could win, gambling that Trevor's vanity and self-interest would outweigh his desire for control. At 4:45, her attorney called. Trevor Hastings agreed to sign away parental rights. His lawyer is sending the paperwork now. It's over. Victoria let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you." "Ms. Ashford, whatever you said to him worked." His attorney sounded rattled. After hanging up, Victoria sat alone in her office as sunset painted the sky orange and gold. She'd just used her resources and influence to protect a child she'd known for less than a month. The board would have questions about her involvement. Some would see it as inappropriate. Others might use it as ammunition to question her judgment. She didn't care. For the first time in her professional life, Victoria had prioritized people over optics, relationship over reputation, and it felt right in a way that closing business deals never had. She found Marcus in the security office reviewing evening shift schedules. He looked up when she entered, and the question in his eyes nearly undid her. "Trevor signed away his rights," Victoria said simply. "It's over. Dylan is legally permanently yours." Marcus stood slowly, like someone who'd just been told the war was over. "How did you—" I reminded him that some things matter more than appearance, and that people who use children as props, don't deserve to call themselves fathers. Victoria, Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. You already have. By showing me what integrity looks like. By being exactly who you are without apology. By raising a child who still believes the world is good because you've protected his innocence while preparing him for reality. Marcus crossed the small office and did something unexpected. He hugged her, not the polite, professional embrace of colleagues, but the fierce, grateful hold of someone who'd just been pulled back from a cliff edge. Victoria wrapped her arms around him and held on, feeling the tension drain from his body as relief replaced fear. They stood like that for a long moment, two people from completely different worlds finding unexpected common ground. Dylan should know, Marcus said finally, pulling back but keeping his hands on her shoulders. Can you come with me to tell him? Are you sure? I'm sure you're part of this now, part of us, if that's something you want. Victoria met his eyes and saw the question beneath the words. This wasn't just about custody battles and legal victories. This was about whether she was ready to truly step outside her carefully controlled life and into something messier, more complicated, and infinitely more real. Yes, she said, I want that. They drove to Marcus's apartment in Victoria's car, the evening traffic giving them time to talk. Marcus told her about Dylan's mother, about the sister who'd been brilliant and stubborn and full of life until cancer had stolen it all. He talked about the decision to leave the Navy, the guilt he still carried about whether he'd made the right choice, the fear that he'd never be enough. Victoria listened and shared her own story, the father who'd valued success over presence, the mother who'd left rather than compete with a company for attention. The years of building walls so high that she'd forgotten what genuine connection felt like. You're tearing those walls down now, Marcus observed, because you showed me there's something worth having on the other side. Dylan was home with the neighbor's teenage daughter, who helped with after-school care. When he saw Victoria with his uncle, his face lit up with uncomplicated joy. Ms. Ashford, did you come to see my new Lego set? I'm building a space station. I'd love to see it, Victoria said, settling onto the floor beside him, while Marcus paid the sitter. But first, your uncle has something important to tell you. Marcus joined them on the floor, his large frame somehow fitting naturally into this small living room filled with toys and homework papers and evidence of life being actively lived. Dylan, buddy, remember how I told you that your biological dad might try to be part of your life? Dylan's smile faded. Is he coming? No, he decided it's better if things stay the way they are. You and me, our family. He signed papers saying I'm legally your dad now. Nothing can change that. Dylan processed this with the seriousness of someone older than 9. So he doesn't want me. I think he realized he's not ready to be the kind of dad you deserve, Marcus said carefully. But I want you. I've always wanted you. And now it's official. Uncle Marcus? Dylan's voice was small. Does this mean you're really my dad, not just my uncle? If that's what you want to call me, then yes. I'm your dad. Dylan launched himself at Marcus, wrapping his arms around his neck with fierce intensity. I want that. You're the best dad ever. Victoria's vision blurred with tears she didn't bother hiding. She watched Marcus hold his nephew, his son, and saw the way Dylan's simple acceptance healed something broken in Marcus's expression. After Dylan calmed down and returned to his Lego construction with renewed enthusiasm, Marcus made dinner while Victoria helped Dylan with homework. The domesticity felt surreal and perfect. She'd spent years in boardrooms and business dinners, but here in this cramped kitchen helping a 9-year-old with multiplication tables, Victoria felt more purposeful than she had in any corporate negotiation. Ms. Ashford? Dylan asked as they reviewed fractions. Are you and Dad dating? Victoria froze. What makes you ask that? He smiles different when you're around. And you came to my science fair and my baseball game, and now you're here helping me with homework. That's what girlfriends do in movies. From the kitchen, Marcus cleared his throat. Dylan, that's not really— I don't know, Dylan, Victoria said honestly. Your dad and I are friends, good friends, and we both care about you very much. Is that okay? Dylan considered this seriously. Yeah, that's okay. But if you decide to be more than friends, that's okay too. You're nice and you make Dad happy. Mom would like you. The simple acceptance in those words nearly broke Victoria. She looked up and found Marcus watching her from the kitchen doorway, his expression open and vulnerable. Your mom would like me? Victoria asked Dylan. Uh-huh. She always said the best people are the ones who show up when things are hard. You showed up, so she'd like you. After dinner and bedtime routines that Victoria observed with fascination, Marcus walked her to her car. The night air was cool and clear, the city sounds muted in this residential neighborhood, so different from Victoria's penthouse tower. Thank you, Marcus said, simply, for everything, for fighting for us, for being here, for seeing us as more than an employee and his kid. Thank you for letting me in, Victoria replied, for giving me a chance to be part of something real. They stood close together, the space between them charged with possibility. Marcus reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind Victoria's ear, his touch careful and warm. Dylan asked if we're dating, Victoria said quietly. I heard. Marcus's hand lingered near her face. What did you tell him? That we're friends, good friends. Is that what we are? Victoria looked into his eyes and saw patience, hope, and something deeper that made her heart race. I think we're becoming something more than that, if you want that too. I do, Marcus said, but I come with complications, a kid who needs stability, a schedule that revolves around school events and homework, a one-bedroom apartment that's nothing like your world. Stop. Victoria placed her hand over his heart. I don't want my world anymore. It's empty and cold and exhausting. I want this, the complications, the homework, the cramped apartment. I want something real, Marcus. I want you. He kissed her then, gentle and sure, his hand cradling her face like she was something precious. Victoria leaned into it, into him, into the terrifying and wonderful reality of choosing connection over control. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. My board is going to have a field day with this, Victoria said. Your boyfriend is your employee. That's definitely against some corporate policy. Then I'll need to find you a different job. Maybe competitor firms are hiring security directors. Marcus laughed. Or maybe you could just be honest about what's happening and deal with the consequences. You're good at that now. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just couldn't see it past my uniform. Victoria kissed him again, softer this time. I see you now, all of you, and I'm not looking away. 3 months later, Victoria stood before her board of directors and made an announcement that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. I'm implementing new policies around workplace relationships and conflicts of interest, she explained to the assembled executives. Full transparency, proper documentation, and recused decision-making where appropriate. These policies will apply to everyone, including me. Is this about your relationship with Marcus Reed? One board member asked bluntly. Yes, Marcus and I are dating. To avoid any appearance of impropriety, he's accepted a position as security director at Cooper Industries. The transition will be complete by next month. Richard Hartley, now officially her COO, spoke up. For what it's worth, this board has seen significant positive changes in company culture over the past few months. Employee satisfaction is up, retention is up, productivity is up. Whatever personal growth you've experienced, it's making you a better CEO. Marcus Reed challenged me to be better, Victoria said simply. He saw potential in this company and in me that I'd stopped believing existed. I'm grateful for that. And yes, I'm also in love with him. Those things can both be true. The board approved her new policies with minimal debate. Later, Victoria suspected Richard had done significant groundwork behind the scenes, but she didn't ask for details. What mattered was this: she'd been honest about what she wanted, accepted the risks, and moved forward anyway. 6 months after that, Victoria attended Dylan's 10th birthday party in the small park near Marcus's apartment. The guest list included Dylan's classmates, teammates from baseball, and neighbors who'd become extended family. Victoria brought an elaborate cake and helped coordinate games while Marcus supervised the chaos with patient competence. "You're good at this," Marcus observed, watching Victoria referee a water balloon fight. "I'm learning," she corrected. "Dylan's a patient teacher." Later, as sunset painted the park golden and parents collected tired, happy children, Dylan approached Victoria with serious eyes. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Always. Are you going to marry my dad?" Victoria's heart skipped. She and Marcus had been discussing exactly that question for weeks, but they hadn't mentioned anything to Dylan yet. "Would you want that?" Victoria asked carefully. "Yeah, you make him happy, and you're basically family already. You come to all my stuff and help with homework, and you don't treat me like I'm annoying, even though I probably am sometimes." "You're never annoying, Dylan. You're wonderful." "So is that a yes?" "That's a, I need to talk to your dad first," Victoria said with a smile. "But between you and me, I hope the answer is yes." Dylan grinned and ran back to his friends, leaving Victoria standing under darkening sky, surrounded by balloons and wrapping paper and the joyful debris of a childhood being lived fully. Marcus joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Dylan corner you with uncomfortable questions. He asked if I'm going to marry you. And I told him I hope so." Victoria turned to face Marcus. "Is that presumptuous of me?" "No." Marcus pulled a small box from his pocket, his hands steady despite the enormous risk. "It's perfect timing." Victoria stared at the ring box, her breath catching. "I know this is fast," Marcus said. "I know we come from different worlds. I know there will be challenges and adjustments and probably arguments about who forgot to pick up groceries, but I also know that you're the bravest person I've ever met. You looked at your own life, saw it was empty, and had the courage to change everything. You fought for my son when you didn't have to. You chose us over your comfortable isolation. Victoria Ashford, will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out fierce and sure. "Yes, absolutely yes." Marcus slipped the ring on her finger, not a massive diamond meant to impress, but a beautiful sapphire surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light like stars. It was perfect because it was chosen specifically for her, not for show. Dylan whooped from across the park, clearly having been watching the entire time. He ran over and hugged them both, creating a tangle of arms and laughter and joy, so pure it made Victoria's chest ache. "We're going to be a real family," Dylan announced. "We already are," Victoria corrected, pulling him close. "We've been family since the first time you showed me that science project." That night, after Dylan was asleep and Victoria sat with Marcus on his worn couch in his small apartment, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the arrogance that had almost cost her everything, the tattoo that had made her pause, the child who'd shown her what unconditional love looked like, the man who'd taught her that strength came in many forms, including the courage to be vulnerable. "I was so wrong about you," Victoria said quietly. "About everything." "You corrected course," Marcus replied. "That's what matters." I almost destroyed your life because I couldn't see past your uniform. But you didn't. You saw the truth and chose to acknowledge it. That takes more courage than never making mistakes in the first place. Victoria leaned against his shoulder, feeling peace in a way she'd never experienced in her penthouse tower, with its city views and expensive furniture. I love you, she said. You and Dylan, my whole imperfect, complicated, beautiful family. We love you too, Marcus said. Our fierce, brilliant, surprisingly good at water balloon fights. CEO. They sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city distant through the windows, the night settling around them like a blanket. Victoria thought about the woman she'd been. Isolated, arrogant, convinced that control was the same as strength. That woman had been wrong about nearly everything. This woman sitting in a small apartment with a ring on her finger and a child sleeping down the hall, finally understood what mattered. Not wealth, not power, not the appearance of success. Just this. Love earned through showing up. Family built through choice. Connection forged through honesty and courage. Victoria had spent 34 years climbing ladders and breaking barriers and proving herself worthy. But she'd never felt as successful as she did right now, planning a future that included homework help and baseball games, and a man who'd challenged her to be better than her worst instincts. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked. That I'm grateful you disobeyed me, Victoria said. That night you refused to let Trevor's fake credentials through. If you'd just followed my orders, I never would have seen who you really were. I'd still be alone in my tower, convinced I had everything. And I'd still be working nights, convinced I had to be invisible to be safe. We saved each other, Victoria realized. Yeah, Marcus agreed. I guess we did. 6 months later, they were married in the same park where Marcus had proposed. Dylan served as best man, taking his duties with adorable seriousness. Victoria wore a simple dress that cost a fraction of what she used to spend on business suits, and she'd never felt more beautiful. Her board attended, along with Marcus's security team, Dylan's classmates, and neighbors who'd become family. The ceremony was small and genuine, focused on promises being made rather than appearances being maintained. When the officiant pronounced them married, Dylan cheered loudest of all. Victoria looked at her husband, her actual partner, not just in business but in life, and at her son, because that's what Dylan was now, officially and forever. She'd started this journey as a woman who'd fired someone for disobeying an order. She was ending it as a woman who'd learned that the best things in life come from trusting people brave enough to tell you when you're wrong. The tattoo had made her pause, but the man wearing it had changed her life. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.